Hello, welcome back. We are always told that science fiction influences reality, everyday life, the physical world we taste, see and hear. It provides inventors, scientists and visionaries the ideas to aim for. But here's a theory. Is it actually the other way around? Is it actually real world overt and covert technologies, science, understanding, stories and events that influence science fiction? It was recently announced that Season 2 of Netflix's incredibly successful Stranger Things will be released 31st of October 2017, Halloween. The show was written by the Duffer Brothers, who took inspiration from a covert military unit known as the Montauk Project. Allegedly operating at Montauk Air Force Base, in fact the original working title of the show was Montauk. They even intended to locate the show at Montauk, a coastal town outside of New York. In this video I will cover the beginnings of the science and people involved via the infamous Philadelphia experiment. Then Montauk, and then towards the end I will chip in my own experience with a snippet of information from Dr. Stephen Greer and the interdimensional military technology called the Cube. Stranger Things is set in a fictional town called Hawkins, Indiana. A young girl escapes a military facility and finds safety with a group of local children. As the program progresses, it reveals she has extraordinary abilities which were enhanced by military-based experiments. The show touches upon multi-dimensional realities and also entities that inhabit those hidden realms. The show's premise, on the face of it, feels like science fiction. If we start to look at the stories that come from the real-life Montauk Project, it starts to feel like the inspired TV version is actually tamer in comparison to the alleged real-life events that took place. I use the word alleged carefully. I feel the witnesses and stories of the people do feel very real, but there is a lack of official evidence. The beginnings of Montauk originate from another military covert project known as the Philadelphia experiment, which occurred around 1943 and involved a Navy destroyer, the USS Eldridge. They were looking into making naval ships invisible from radar. They were successful, even more than expected. Through an electrical field manipulation, the vessel completely disappeared. The ship dropped out of space-time. It was completely unexpected. The project's scope extended. There were stories of teleportation of the ship and even small-scale time travel. There were also disturbing reports that mangled sailors became stuck within the metal hull upon rematerialization. The project was disbanded after these violent incidents. The Philadelphia experiment is important. It was the precursor to the Montauk Project. Individuals who worked on Philadelphia moved over to Montauk. The science and scope appears from my eyes as a continuation of the original research. The Montauk scope can be difficult to piece together. The only evidence we have are from the people involved. Many of them were blank slated, their memories wiped or manipulated. Their memories only return years after the event. Some of the involved parties' memories resurfaced because of a major motion picture was released based on the Philadelphia experiment story. The Montauk Project beginnings were funded by captured Nazi gold. After this was used up, the Krupp family, who owned munitions factories during World War I and II, carried on financing the project. Radar technicians became interested how the frequency and pulse of radar could change people's general mood on base. It also influenced their thinking. This led to them positioning a chair in a building and directing radar straight at the chair. A person would sit in the chair, usually a psychic called Duncan who was experimented on frequently. By opening and closing the building's door, they could determine how much UHF microwave energy was allowed into the room. They experimented with different pulse widths, rates and frequencies. They could alter people's emotions, make them sleep, cry, laugh and be agitated. Through further investigation, they realised that between 425 and 450 megahertz of radio frequency power could grant them a window into the human mind. Many people died during this experimentation. After much testing, they were able to make the apparatus safer, along with devising a control panel for greater accuracy. Allowing different pulse modulations and timings, they could pulse anything they wanted and expect a desired effect. They had essentially created a mind control device. After many years perfecting the technology and their understanding, along with borrowing technology from other covert operations, they continued to develop the chair. It allowed them to transmit human thought and powerfully enhance it. They understood the power of our consciousness and were able to harness it in truly unbelievable ways. If psychic Duncan concentrated on visualising a solid object in his mind, with assistance from the chair, the solid object materialised out of thin air. It's hard to comprehend this type of technology ever existing. I leave it to your own discernment. The power of the chair was so sophisticated that the primary tester psychic, Duncan, became a highly trained instrument himself. They were able to use the power of the mind to create time vortexes, which gave them time-travelling possibilities. They started to experiment with altering aspects of time, making small tweaks to see if the changes would resonate and improve the present day. At this point, Montauk boys enter the story. The Montauk boys appear to be a side operation. Montauk boys were gifted and sometimes unfortunately taken from the street, or occasionally borrowed from their families for a few hours and days and then returned. This side of the Montauk Project really is the most disturbing. It borrowed techniques from disturbing, brutal former Nazi experiments. Stewart Swerdlow claims to have been a victim of the Montauk Boys project. He was one of the many whistleblowers to explain their experiences. He states the main focus of the operation was mind control, enhancing abilities, creating young super soldiers. Its process was incredibly brutal, shocking. It involved using boys that had a specific physical biology and psychological traits. Mind control works by initially creating abject fear and terror in the boy. This was done through beating, drownings, and sometimes even rape. Through sustained pure terror, they divided the personality, fractured the mind. They would then take a small fragment of their subconscious and develop a sub-personality. This sub-personality via a code word could be activated at any point to carry out orders unwittingly and without question. Many boys never survived the horrifying experiment. As part of the process, they were given a cocktail of drugs to enhance the mind control. Swerdlow claims that he and other boys were badly beaten, drugs, their personalities fractured. Weird ceremonies would be performed, conjuring astral entities to enter their bodies. Their mental state was in such disarray, they were unable to resist. Boys that survived, some were trained as spies, assassins, or even military psychics. Swerdlow claims there could be up to 100,000 latent former Montauk boys out in society waiting to be activated. Through our reading, it appears the Montauk boys were utilised, experimenting with time travel, sending boys back in time. Many never returned. It was at this point the inner team realised apocalyptic proportions of the project. They were messing with natural law. The Stranger Things narrative now bleeds into real life. The alleged story goes that Duncan and a few of the technicians decided to sabotage the project. Whilst in the chair, Duncan let loose a huge hairy monster from his subconscious. I know this is crazy, but this is how the story goes. The monster started to cause havoc across the base. The only way to stop it was to destroy the chair. The monster disappeared immediately into the ether. Shortly after the Montauk Project was halted, the base was mothballed. The majority of people involved, their memories were wiped. It wasn't until years later people started to come forward with latent memories. The mind control had started to malfunction. There is so much more to this story. Preston Nichols, his first book, The Montauk Project, Experiments in Time, it covers everything in more depth. I'll post some links to people who are involved in the Montauk, who remember their time with Philadelphia and Montauk. The story is disturbing in the way it treats people, but especially children. But also it shows us the power of consciousness. Duncan Cameron continues to work as a psychic and has a very deep level of understanding about consciousness and its potential to create. It makes you think in 2017, is this type of technology still in existence? The mind control, time travel, latent former child soldiers. Who controls it? It's a chilling thought. On that topic, I want to bring my own experience from contact in the desert. During a talk with Dr. Stephen Greer, he mentioned a military technology called the Cube in a nearby military base, which sounded very much like the Montauk chair. I thought maybe it was at 29 Palms Air Force Base, but I wasn't completely sure. But it was close to Yucca Valley where the contact in the desert occurred. I will leave you with a film I videoed at the time talking about the subject. But for now, thanks very much. Bye-bye. So, here we are, Joshua Tree National Park. I just wanted to do a small video snippet. It was yesterday was quite interesting. As I drove through Joshua Tree National Park, I sort of drove into 29 Palms. I was looking to get a coffee, so I saw on my GPS there was a Starbucks up ahead, so I kind of started driving in that direction. And then it turns out I came to a checkpoint. Initially I thought it was just some kind of security. I mean, I don't really have a huge amount of experience with being an American. I just assumed this was some kind of toll booth or maybe security check, but it actually turned out to be military in origin. And what also turned out to be a military base, which I didn't realise, in 29 Palms. And what was interesting about that, because during the Contact Festival, I had an evening with Dr. Greer, Stephen Greer, when he was sort of teaching the CE5 protocols under the night sky in just outside Joshua Tree. And the preamble before the actual CE5 protocols, he was talking about that there was a nearby military base, and they had a particular covert technology called the Cube. Now this sort of starts to bleed into sort of fiction, where, you know, the program Stranger Things, where you have these sort of military-based scientists sort of messing around with sort of other dimensions, and then weirdly the Cube is kind of quite similar to what they discuss in Stranger Things, the program. And obviously it's becoming more and more apparent that we live in a multi-dimensional reality, and apparently this Cube technology is able to tap into other dimensions and materialize some of the creatures or entities that exist in these other dimensions that we don't have access to, and bring them into this reality. And apparently that's been in a way weaponized, and so what he said was, the intel that he had was that this Cube was being used to materialize creatures around people to scare them. And obviously that's using it as a weapon of fear, essentially. But yeah, very strange. I wasn't expecting it. I can't completely confirm that was the military base that he was talking about, but he did say it was really close by, so I assume maybe it was that one. The mainstream information, which there isn't a lot about this base, does sort of specify that it's a naval base and that the Marines train there. Mainly for combat training, I guess. Yeah, the desert being the desert, there's a lot of room for them to be firing guns and setting off bombs. But obviously, it didn't really discuss any of the covert projects that they're developing. But yeah, very very weird, a little bit dark, or very dark. But yeah, I just thought I wanted to do a small video on that. Thankfully, the security guy, the military personnel, was very kind, explained that it was a military base and enabled me to do a U-turn. But yeah, like I said, I thought I'd just do a quick video. As you can see, that base is in the distance, just beyond that small stone hill. And yeah,